Shalom, shalom, shalom. It's been a while since I've been here and had a lot on my mind, especially with what I found out. Just keep me in prayer. I need wisdom. And it's gone. So we're going to put the trial of the millennia on trial. I was recently rereading Acts. I posted this on Facebook, I think, last week, showing why is Paul always bald? And I found some interesting things. First Corinthians 11:14, it says, does not even nature itself teach you that if a man has long hair, it is a dishonor to him? And it's funny, the man that the Torah keepers, they say he kept Torah, he loved the Torah. Then why is he appealing to nature, to natural law? And it's funny also because lions have long hair, right? Have you ever seen a lion with short hair? Oh, sorry, Paul. I guess you were wrong about that. What else are you wrong about? I wonder if if you show this to a Messianic, if they would go, actually, I want to do something. I'm going to meme and live stream. Okay, check this out. Copy this, image flip it, create a meme, paste it, boom. Oh, that's not what it says. Oh, does not nature itself. Does not nature. Perfect. Boom. We have to share that now. Share it there. Paul. There. Having a sense of humor is so important. You should mourn, absolutely. Mourning is important, and having these emotions is important. It's being a human being that God created you to be. In fact, Father just showed me something that I should share with you. So check this out. Uh, in Genesis 6, we are created in the image of Yahweh, right? In Genesis 6:6, it says, Yahweh regretted that he had made mankind on the earth. He was grieved in his heart. I mean, if our Creator grieves, why wouldn't we? And I see these New Agers, they say, I don't want to say good morning because it sounds like mourning, like sadness. Like joy comes in the morning, right? And that's a powerful statement if you think about it, because what does that say? Joy and mourning. There we go. So check out this psalm. Weeping may last for the night, but a shout of joy comes in the morning. It's the morning. So why would I not be joyful? Why would I not praise Yah for this day? So let's go back to the trial of the millennia. So in Acts 18 is where it starts. And I found an interesting verse here just this morning. And he stayed there a year and 6 months. So he was in this place for 18 months. Where was he? He was at Corinth, a Greek city. So he stayed in Corinth for 18 months, according to the author of Acts. That's a long time, but it also uh, it's incredibly problematic. And you notice I'm asking about J Man because this is also important. I just want a summary. I don't want all this. Yes, because we have to believe that's happened. I don't. I think it's allegory showing him as a rebellious boy. So, as we see in the Gospels record that he traveled to Jerusalem 5 times over the course of his life and ministry. Hey, you guys don't know the Torah, and that's why you don't have a problem with this. Even you, those of you pursuing Messianic Torah keeping, you don't know the Torah. Exodus 23:17. 3 times a year, all your males to appear before Yahweh your Elohim. 3 times. Three. So they say his ministry was 3 years long. So even in the Got spell, you should see 9 visits. And this is why I went through this, because in Acts 18, what do we see? And this is why I truly believe this is allegory. There's no way he kept Torah. I mean, this is right before the accusation, right? And he was reasoning in the synagogue every Shabbat in the Corinth area, trying to persuade the Jews and the Greeks. But when Silas and Timothy came down from Macedonia, Paul began devoting himself completely to the word, solemnly bearing witness to the Jews that J-Man is the Messiah. But when they resisted and blasphemed, he shook out his garments and said to them, your blood be on your own heads. I am clean, for now I am going to the Gentiles. Okay. So they didn't believe him. And, why didn't they believe him? No one ever asks that. You don't think that. It's just whoosh. You just read it like this. Lightning speed. Whoosh. They didn't believe him. And when he left there and went to the house of a man named Titus Justus, a God-fearer, whose house was next to the synagogue, and Crispus, the leader of the synagogue, believed in the Lord with all his household, and many of the Corinthians and the sees in Corinth, when they heard, were believing and being baptized. And the Lord said to Paul in the night by a vision, the Lord, do not be afraid, but go on speaking and be silent, for I am with you, and no man will lay a hand on you in order to harm you, for I have many people in this city. And he stayed there a year and 6 months, teaching the word of God among them. Hello. It's like McFly. Hello. A year and 6 months, 18 months away from the chosen city, not keeping Torah, because the Torah says 3 times a year, every male shall visit and makes offerings to Yahweh. He missed at least 4 times in 18 months, at least. But while Gallio was proconsul of Achaia, the Jews with one accord rose up against Paul and brought him before the judgment seat. And it's right after it tells us he was not visiting the chosen city. It wasn't. It's like crazy. How did I not notice that before? Saying this man persuades men to worship God contrary to the Torah. I'm thinking the case is closed in my mind. How is he staying in Corinth 18 months and not persuading men that they can worship God contrary to the Torah? But when Paul was about to open his mouth, Gallio said to the Jews, and this is so funny as well. It's like, and I do believe this is all allegory. Why are they going to a Roman to have them judge whether or not Paul was keeping the Torah? Oh, it's crazy. But when Paul was about to open his mouth, Gallio said to the Jews, "If it were a wrongdoing or a vicious crime, O Jews, it would be reasonable for me to put up with you." Remember, allegory. Why did they take him to Pontius Pilate? It's, hello, paying attention? If there were a wrongdoing or vicious crime, O Jews, it would be reasonable for me to put up with you. What? And you read this again, you're like, whoosh! It missed me. I didn't get hit by the truth. But if there are questions about words and names in your own law, see to it yourselves. They had the ability to execute criminals. Yes, the Jews in the first century could execute criminals. This is all allegory. And it tells you right here, before we even get to the real meat and potatoes of the issue, that yes, Paul was violating Torah. He did not go up to the chosen city 3 times. But if there are questions about words and names and your own law, see to it yourselves. I am not willing to be a judge in these matters. Yeah. Why is he not willing to judge in those matters? Because he doesn't know the Torah. Why would the Jews even go and take this man to Pontius Pilate? Oh, I mean, sorry, Archaea, Gallio. Why would they take him there? So now let's go forward a little bit more, and we see in Acts 18:18, and Paul, having remained many days longer, took leave of the brothers and put out to sea for Syria, and with him was Priscilla and Aquila in Cenchreae. He had his hair cut, for he was keeping a vow. So here we see him like cutting his hair, right? This is what I made a point of saying. Why were they asking that? Paul, why are you always bald? Every time we see you here in Corinth, you're cutting your hair. It's because he was being accused of violating the Torah. And if we look back a few chapters earlier, what does he say? 1 Corinthians 9, in verse 20, and to the Jews I became as a Jew so that I might win Jews. To those who were under the law as under the law, though not being myself under the law, so that I might win those who were under the law. To those who were without the law as without the law. This is just moral relativism. It's just complete moral relativism. Paul has no standards. And, he got caught not going to the chosen city, teaching men they don't have to obey Torah, which you clearly see in his epistles. And then he says, well, I got to reset my vow again. I got caught. Just shave it all off and go make an offering, and then it's okay. So then let's go forward a bit to Acts 21, where he's caught again. Acts 21, Paul, again, is in Jerusalem this time, actually going to the chosen city a little later than he should have, but he made it finally. And the following day, Paul went in with Jacob, and all the elders were present. And after he had greeted them, he began to relate one by one the things which God did among the Gentiles throughout his ministry. And when they heard it, they began glorifying God. And they said to him, you see, brother, how thousands there are among the Jews of those who have believed, and they are zealous for the law. And they have been told about you that you are teaching all the Jews who are among the Gentiles to forsake Moses, telling them not to circumcise their children or walk according to the customs. I've actually seen, you know, these Torah keeper Christians, they try to defend this. But look at what Paul says in Galatians. Behold, I, Paul, say to you that if you receive circumcision, the Christus will be of no benefit to you. You think he's just speaking to the Gentiles? If he's speaking to Jews and Gentiles, why would the Jews say, well, the Greeks and the Romans don't like circumcision anyways, it makes us an outcast? That's awesome, Father. So let's just do it. And you see, Christ cult's doing this today. The LDS Church, the Mormons, now have embraced beards again. Brigham Young, I don't know if you've seen pictures of him. He had a beard like down to his belly button. Now though, they embrace it. And there was a saying here I just found hilarious. I wonder if it's in this article. Yeah, this is funny. I could finally look like some of the other hipsters that I work with at my tech job in Lehigh. All these young guys are getting into these grooming creams and stuff. It sounds kind of fun. I'll fit in a little better and feel like I'm part of their group and still be able to sit on the stand guilt-free on Sundays, Bart said laughingly. I can look like a hipster. Like, what in the world? Like, are your standards from men or from Yahweh, from God Almighty? And look at a little lower. However, we're not all on board with these new grooming updates. I support changes within the church. Well, I certainly don't, but I'm not a member of your church. But Father is eternal; He doesn't change, and this is part of the problem with Paul. Remember in 1 Corinthians 9 what he said. I'm all things to all people. He's like a chameleon, just like the Mormons. We'll be whatever we have to be to fit in and sell our message. I have always been clean shaven and believe that the younger generation should be as well, said a BYU professor who has to remain anonymous due to his current role within the university. It is a shame that we are going to now look like everyone else. Beard cards have been a staple of this university for years, and as someone that enforced the clean-shaven honor code, I will miss it. I feel like this is something that made us stand out in a good way. Okay. Making yourself look like a little boy doesn't make you stand out. A beard is part of being a man. It is a sensory thing. It gives you extra insight into what's going on around you. And in the winter, it protects your face. All right, so let's go back to this. Right. So Paul, and I testify again to every man who receives circumcision. Notice he says every man, not just the Gentiles, that he is under the obligation to keep the whole law. And this is why, this whole idea that Paul loved Torah, the way we see in Psalm 119. Let's look at that real quick. So, and just look up the word law. How blessed are those whose ways is blameless, who walk in the law of Yahweh. Oh, yeah. Open my eyes that I may behold wonderful things from your law. Remove the false way from me, and graciously grant me your law. Cause me to understand that I may observe your law and keep it within all my heart. So I will keep your law continually, forever and ever. The arrogant utterly scoff at me, yet I do not turn aside from your law. Burning indignation has seized me because of the wicked who forsake your law. I remember in the night your name, O Yahweh, so I keep your law. And this also goes for the Talmudists out there. The Talmudists who say that their oral Torah is part of the Torah. And then they lie and say, well, it's just opinion when they're debating the Christians. The Torah tells you the name of Yahweh, and they say, well, you don't only know how to pronounce it because of the oral Torah. Now, I don't believe that. I don't. But if you want to believe that, why do you still call him Hashem? You've just added the Torah. You're doing the same thing as Paul, the same thing as the Mormons, and you do the same thing with all of the Torah. You add to the Torah, you take from the Torah, and then you criticize the Mormons and the Christians. There's a saying by, I wonder if it's in the meme generator. I would love to make a meme of that. Let's do another one. Oh, there's not one of Tobia? That's too bad. Why does he not have a beard? How many of you know what I'm going to put in here? This is really the truth about Talmudists. They will criticize the Christians, the Mormons, probably the Buddhists, I don't know. But, he has the statement, if it is new, it is not true. If it's true, it is not new. Well, okay. That's a good statement, but why do you not use that same standard to judge the Talmud and the Mishnah? If it's new there, it is true. There is a place of torment called Gehenna, which is not in the Torah, that Adam did sleep with the animals. You guys are just hypocrites. And then you try to prevent the outsider from seeking God, telling them that if they keep the Sabbath, they're going to be destroyed. You're a lot like Paul, except Paul was a moral relativist openly, and you are just privately. You criticize Paul and the Mormons for being relativists, but ignore your own relativism and ignoring the absolute truth of Torah. So we know that Paul did tell men not to circumcise their children, to not walk according to the customs. I mean, he was in Corinth for 18 months. Excuse me. What is then to be done? They will certainly hear you have come. Therefore, to this that we tell you, we have 4 men who are under a vow, the Nazarite vow, right? They took the Nazarite vow. And maybe some of you were not familiar with that in Numbers 6. And again, Yahweh spoke to Moshe, saying, speak to the sons of Israel and say to them, when a man or a woman a special vow, the vow of Nazarite, to dedicate himself as a Nazarite to Yahweh, he shall abstain as a Nazarite from wine and strong drink, and he shall drink no vinegar, whether made from wine or strong drink, nor shall he drink any grape juice, nor eat any fresh or dried grapes. And this is something that Charles pointed out to me, if he was truly under the Nazarite vow, and every indication of Acts makes this apparent. And I believe this is what Mr. Matthew, I don't know what his real name was, meant with Matthew 2:23. He came and lived in a city called Nazareth, so that what was spoken through the prophets would be fulfilled. And this is not in any prophet. It doesn't exist. He shall be called a Nazarene. And I think that he was referring to the Nazarite vow, how Samson was a Nazarite, Samuel was a Nazarite, and trying to make this connection that the Christos of the first century would be a Nazarite, but he confused a vow with a place. And this is like, I've asked, the Messianics, the Christians, like, where is this in the prophets? And they always point to like either the vow or the branch, the Netzir. But both of them are concepts and vows, not a place name. Matthew is using this as he will be called a Nazareth because he's from the city called Nazareth. He's trying to connect it to a place, which is just crazy that you're now taking what he's saying and say, well, he meant this actually. That's not what he says. And there is no prophet that says this. So the other issues, though, they're supposed to abstain from wine. And neither J-Man, who's called a drunkard, even before he does this profane communion ritual, he's literally called a drunkard, which means he was a wine bibber. And Paul, who also is sharing this communion ritual of drinking wine, while he's supposed to be under the Nazarite vow, which prohibits drinking wine and strong drink. All the days of his Nazarite vow he shall eat anything that is produced by the grapevine, from the seeds even to the skin. All the days of his vow the Nazarite has no razor shall pass over his head. He shall be until the days are fulfilled, which he dedicated himself as a Nazarite to Yehovah. He shall let the locks of his hair and his head grow long. And again, remember, we started with that, the lion meme, that, it is a shame for a man to have long hair. And he loves Torah, remember? He loves the Torah, even though the Torah says it's not a shame, that it's an honor for a man to take this vow and to have long hair. Look, it's a shame for a man to have long hair. I'm ashamed of myself. I have a beard and a long hair. I can't be a Mormon. All the days of his dedication as a Nazarite to Yehovah, he shall not go near a dead person. Oh, that's fascinating. I didn't even catch that. Him resurrecting the dead. Both Paul and J-Man do this, even though they were supposed to be under this vow. He shall not defile himself for his father or his mother, his brother or his sister when they die, because the Nazarite vow is to his Elohim is on his head. All the days of the Nazarite vow he is set apart, kadosh, to Yehovah. But if a man dies very suddenly beside him, and he defiles the head of his hair during his Nazarite vow, then he shall shave his head the day he becomes clean. He shall shave it on the 7th day. Then on the 8th day he shall bring 2 turtle doves or 2 young pigeons to the priest to the doorway of the tent of meeting. And the priest shall offer one for a sin offering, and this is important too. He shall offer one for a sin offering and the other for burnt offering, make atonement for him concerning his sin because of the dead person. And the same day he shall set apart his head as holy. They shall dedicate to Yehovah the days of its Nazarite vow, shall bring a male lamb a year old for a guilt offering, but the former days will be void because this Nazarite vow was defiled. So in Acts 21, we see Paul is accused of defiling the Torah. And this is the vow they are under. So it says, take them, purify yourself among them, and pay their expenses, that they may shave their heads, resetting the vow because they are considered defiled. Then, and again, we see, Paul is again shaving his head because he was found out to defile the Torah. Then all will know that there is nothing to the things which they have been told about you, but that you yourself walk orderly, keeping the Torah. But concerning the Gentiles who have believed, we have wrote, having decided that they should keep from meat sacrificed to idols, from blood, which means you shouldn't be doing your communion ritual, from what is strangled, and from sexual immorality. Then Paul took them in, and the next day, purifying himself among them, went into the temple, giving notice of the completion of the days of purification until the sacrifice was offered for each one of them. I thought he was the end of sacrifice, according to the book of Hebrews. That's what I mean. Like, you read these books and it just goes whoosh. He made an offering for his sin because the days of purification were over. but the sacrifice system is over after the resurrection. Mm-mm. It's right here in your New Testament. Oh, lordy, lordy, lordy. That's Now when the 7 days were almost over, the Jews from Asia, upon noticing him in the temple, began to throw all the crowd into confusion and laid hands on him, crying out, "Men of Israel, help! This is the man who teaches everyone everywhere against our people and the law and this place." I mean, yeah, that sounds like Paul. Tell me who you want to be under the law. Do you listen to the law? For it is written, Abraham had two sons, one by the servant woman, one by the free woman. But the son by the servant woman had been born according to the flesh, while the son by the free woman through the promise. This is spoken through allegory, for these women are the two covenants. No, there are not two covenants. This is nonsense. One from Mount Sinai, bearing children into slavery. So, Messianicism doesn't even make sense with that statement. It really doesn't. And, this is one of the things I remember struggling so much to understand this passage. And I would listen to 119 Ministries, to Triumph and Truth, to Corner Fringe Ministries, to try to make sense of Paul. Because this passage is so profoundly clear that Sinai, which now I'm trying to follow the 10 words given at Sinai to make my life a model of his Torah that came through Moses. And he's saying Sinai bears children into slavery. I mean, this is such an offensive statement. And again, it just goes whoosh. I mean, you realize how profoundly sick this statement is? That is saying Father Yah, who freed his son Israel, and that's Exodus 4:22, freed his son Israel from slavery to deliver them into slavery? I mean, this is just profoundly sick. I mean, they were in slavery in Egypt for 215 years, but how, according to Paul, they were in slavery to Sinai, to the Torah, for thousands of years, which would make Yehovah worse than Pharaoh. I mean, do you read these words and really understand them? How profoundly sick Paul was? And besides, he has even brought Greeks into the temple and defiled this holy place. This is the accusation. This is so important. He was accused of bringing Greeks into the temple and defiled this place. For they previously had seen Trophimus, the Ephesian, in the city with him, and they supposed that Paul had brought him into the temple. Why is this important? Well, again, Galatians, right? Galatians 2. But not even Titus, who was with me, though he was a Greek, was compelled to be circumcised. So he was hanging out with men that did not follow Torah, refused to receive the circumcision of the flesh. I go to Philippians 3. Finally, my brothers, rejoice in the Lord. To write the same things again to you, no trouble to me. It is a safeguard for you. Beware of the dogs. Who's he calling dogs? The Jews. Beware of evil workers. Beware of the mutilation. And he's saying the circumcision of the flesh is mutilation. For we are the circumcision. Even though you're not circumcised in the flesh, I challenge you to really read the law and the prophets. Ezekiel 44:7. When you brought in foreigners, uncircumcised in heart and uncircumcised in flesh, to be in my sanctuary, to profane it, even my house, when you brought near my food, the fat and the blood, so they made my covenant void. This in addition to all your abominations. And you have not kept the responsibility of my holy things yourselves, but you have set foreigners as keepers of the responsibility given by me for my sanctuary. Thus says Lord Yehovah, no foreigner, uncircumcised in the heart and uncircumcised in the flesh, of all the foreigners who are among the sons of Israel, shall enter my sanctuary. Now there's two choices or the Messianics, the Christians. One, well, actually, maybe there's a third. One, Ezekiel is lying here. Two, Paul is lying. If Paul is lying, then you have to figure out what to do with the rest of the New Testament, because every New Testament writing is based on Paul's message. Yes, Matthew, Luke, Mark, John, they're all based on Paul's message. They can't exist without his message. The only contradiction to that are James, Jude, and 2 Peter. And I believe 2 Peter is allegory against Paul. But then you still have problems. He didn't return in the first century like he promised. So then all the city was stirred, and the people rushed together. Taking hold of Paul, they dragged him out of the temple, and immediately the doors were shut. While they were seeking to kill him, a report came up that the commander of the Roman cohort that all Jerusalem was in confusion. At once he took along the soldiers and centurions and ran down to them. And when they saw the commander of the soldiers, they stopped beating Paul. When the commander came up and took hold of him and ordered him to be bound with 2 chains, and he had begun asking who he was and what he had done. And remember, I truly believe this is allegory. It wasn't the Romans that beat J-Man. It was the Jews that were upset with him. Now, that's a whole other issue. Were they justified in doing that? Were they righteous in doing that? That's a whole nother issue. They have to have 2 or 3 witnesses against his crimes. And we don't have enough evidence for that. But among the crowd, some were shouting one thing and some another. And we could not find out the facts because of the uproar. He ordered him brought into the barracks. And when he got to the stairs, he actually was carried by the soldiers because of the violence of the crowd. For the multitude of the people kept following them, shouting, "Away with him!" As Paul was about to be brought into the barracks, he said to the commander, "May I say something to you?" And he said, "Do you know Greek? Then you are not the Egyptian who some time ago raised in the revolt, then led 4,000 men of the assassins to the wilderness." Every single thing is important. Why did Plutarch include this phrase? Why are we talking about an Egyptian that was raising a revolt and led 4,000 men out into the wilderness? But Paul said, "I am the Jew of Tarsus in Cilicia, a citizen of no insignificant city, and I beg you, allow me to speak to the people." And when he had given him permission, Paul, standing on the stairs, mentioned to the people with his hand, and when there was a great hush, he spoke to them in the Hebrew language, saying, "Men, brothers, and fathers, hear my defense which I now offer you." And when they heard he was addressing them in the Hebrew language, they became even quieter, and he said, "I am a Jew born in Tarsus of Cilicia, but having been brought up in the city, having been instructed at the feet of Gamaliel." And that's a fascinating statement, I don't even know why he would claim this. Remember in Acts 5, Gamaliel counsels all of the Jews, including Paul, this. But when they heard this, they became furious and intended to kill them. These were the preachers preaching the message, right? But a Pharisee named Gamaliel, a teacher of the law, respected by all the people, stood up in the Sanhedrin and gave orders to put all the men outside for a short time. And he said to the men of Israel, "Take care what you propose to do with these men." For some time ago, Theudas arose up, claiming to be somebody, and a group of about 400 men joined up with him. But he was killed, and all who followed him were dispersed and came to nothing. After this man, Yehuda the Galilean, which I have a video series about, rose up in the days of the census and drew away many people with him. He too perished, and all these who were following him were scattered. So in the present case, I also say to you, stay away from these men and let them alone. For if this plan or action of men is to be overthrown, but if it's of God, you are not able to overthrow them, or maybe even fighting against God. And this is something also you see Tovia bring up, and why Talmudism is true, because it survived. Yeah, so did the Roman Catholic Church. Is the Roman Catholic Church of God? Yes. This is so important. Like, understanding that, he sends forth lies. He sends forth the delusion. Yahweh said, "Who will entice Ahab so that he will go up to fall at Ramoth Gilead?" And one said this while another said that. And then a spirit came forward, stood before Yahweh, and said, "I will entice him." And Yahweh said to him, "How?" And he said, "I will go out and be a lying spirit in the mouth of all his prophets." Then he said, "You shall entice him and also prevail. Go out and do so." Zechariah 5. Then I lifted up my eyes again and saw, but behold, a flying scroll. And he said to me, "What do you see?" I said, "I see a flying scroll. Its length is 20 cubits and its width 10 cubits. Then he said to me, "This is the curse that is going forth over the whole land. Surely everyone who steals will be purged away according to the writing on one side. Everyone who swears will be purged away according to the writing on the other side. I will make it go forth, says Yahweh hosts, and I will enter the house of the thief." And it's interesting in verse of what you see J-Man saying, that he is the thief entering the house. He is the flying scroll in the house of the one who swears falsely by my name, and it will spend the night within the house and consume it with its timber and stones. Cursed for not following Torah. So Gamaliel, there's no way he was a true student, because he didn't heed the words. According to the strictness of the law, our fathers, being zealous for God, just as you are today. We already proved that to be false as well. He was not zealous for the law. He just was a amorphous blob who said whatever he had to convince people that he was not a liar. I persecuted this way to the death, binding and delivering both men and women into prisons. Again, why? Gamaliel told you not to do that, as also the high priest and all the council of the elders can testify. Well, isn't this interesting? He's making this appeal to the high priest, who was Ananias, in Acts 5, and also in the next chapter, and you'll see what we mean there. For them, I also received letters to the brothers and started off for Damascus in order to bring even those who were there to Jerusalem as prisoners to be punished. But it happened that as I was on my way approaching Damascus about noontime, a very bright light suddenly flashed from heaven all around me, and fell to the ground, and heard a voice saying to me, "Saul, Saul, why are you persecuting me?" And there's another line in here that's missing from this version. He talked about kicking at the goads, which is from a Greek play written in 360 BC. And I answered, "Who are you, Lord?" And he said to him, "I am J-Man, the Nazarene, whom you are persecuting." And those who were with me beheld the light, to be sure, but did not understand the voice of the one who was speaking to me. And I said, "What should I do, Lord?" And the Lord said to me, "Rise up and go on into Damascus, and there you will be told of all that it must be determined for you to do." But since I could not see because of the glory of that light, being led by the hand, those who were with me came into Damascus. Now a certain Ananias, and it's interesting, how he reuses this name, and I'm sure there's allegorical reasoning behind that. A man who was devout by the standard of the law, and well spoken of by all the Jews who lived there, came to me, and standing near said to me, "Brother Saul, regain your sight." And at that very hour I regained my sight and saw him. And he said, "The God of our fathers has appointed you to know his will, and see the righteous one, and to hear a voice from his mouth. For you will be a witness for him to all the men that you have seen and heard. Now why do you delay? Rise up and be baptized and wash away your sins, calling on his name." Now it happened when I returned to Jerusalem and was praying in the temple, that I fell into a trance. And I saw him saying to me, "Hurry and get out of Jerusalem quickly, because they will not accept your witness about me." And I said, "Lord, they themselves understand that in one synagogue after another I used to imprison and beat those who believed in you. And when the blood of your witness Stephen was being shed, I also was being approved by him, the guarding garments of those who were slaying him." So you see, he immediately goes back to Jerusalem, right? But you're not paying attention when you read his epistle to the Galatians. "For you have heard my conduct." Where's that? Yeah. So after his vision in Galatians 1 here, he says he was revealing the Son, which he wasn't because the Son is Israel. He didn't know Torah. In me that I might also proclaim him as the good news among the Gentiles. I did not immediately consult with flesh and blood, but he did, according to Acts. So one of these testimonies is a lie, or Acts is using allegory to reveal the lie. Nor did I go up to Jerusalem to those who were apostles before me, but I went away to Arabia and returned once more to Damascus. Why does Acts not talk about Arabia? And he was there for 3 years. And that's when he went up to Jerusalem, become acquainted with Cephas, and stayed with him 15 days. He doesn't talk about anything that he's saying in this witness in Acts 22. And nothing is similar here. And this is important, just like the 18 months were important. 3 years he spent wandering in Arabia, not going to the chosen city. 3 years is the length of whose ministry? You don't think that's important? It's not crucial? Look what Paul says in Galatians 4. And it proves that he never had his sight recovered by Ananias. So 4:14, and that which was a trial to you in my body condition, you did not despise or loathe, but you received me as an angel of God, as Christ Jesus himself. Literally saying, I am the Christ. What there is the sense of blessing you had, for I testify to you that if possible, you would have plucked your eyes out and given them to me. Why would people be needing to do that? And this is something you see repeated in Matthew 5, this plucking out of the eye, out, and this Masonic symbology, because Paul's blindness was clearly not healed. This is why he tells us, that he's writing with such huge letters. See with what large letters I am writing with my own hand. Why was he doing that? Because he was blind. So Paul then says in Acts 22:22, and they listening to him up to this statement, and they then raised their voices, away with such a fellow from the earth, for he should not be allowed to live. As they were crying out and throwing off their garments and tossing them to the dust in the air, because they know the truth, they know he was violating Torah, the commander ordered him to be brought into the barracks, saying that he should be examined by flogging, so that they might find out the reason why they were shouting against him that way. But when they stretched him out with leather straps, Paul said to the centurion who was standing by, is it lawful for you to flog a man who is a Roman and uncondemned? And again, allegory. This is allegory. But when the centurion heard this, he went to the commander and reported to him, saying, what are you about to do? For this man is a Roman. And the commander came and said to him, tell me, are you a Roman? And he said, yes. And the commander answered, I acquired this citizenship with a large sum of money. We're so blind, we don't see the truth. Good grief. And Paul said, but I have been born a citizen. Therefore, those who were about to examine him immediately withdrew from him, and the commander also was afraid when he learned that he was a Roman, and because he had been bound by him. But on the next day, wishing to know for certain why he had been accused by the Jews, he released him and ordered the chief priests and all the Sanhedrin to come together, and brought Paul down and set him before them. So now we get to the most important trial here. This is the one that I wanted to discuss, because this is what would have happened with J-Man. He would have been tried by the Jews to find out, is he guilty or not? Because otherwise it's not a just trial. They would not have taken him to the Romans, and the Romans would not have cared, as we see in Paul's trial. And I'm not going to go over that, because I want to try to keep this under an hour. But Paul is an example, an allegory of the truth. Now, Paul, looking intently at the Sanhedrin, said, "Brothers, I have lived my life in all good conscience up before God to this day." There is such an appeal to the heart and mind being the standard of truth in the New Testament. Like, look at, like, for example, what he says in Romans 13 about food. Is it, maybe it's chapter 14. Yeah. Do not tear down the work of God for the sake of food. All things are indeed clean. And this is one of the passage, you Roman Christians used to justify that, what Father says is unclean is no longer unclean because, all things are indeed clean. So you can go eat a pile of dog crap and pray over it and it be clean. Hallelujah, right? I mean, you guys don't even think about this. Is eating human flesh now clean? Why not? All things are indeed clean. But they are evil for the man who eats and gives offense. It is not good to not eat meat or drink wine or to do anything by which your brother stumbles. The faith which you have as your own conviction before God. Blessed is he who does not judge himself in what he approves, but he who doubts if he is condemned if he eats. You're not condemned by the Torah. You're condemned by your mind, by your doubt. Because his eating is not from faith, and whatever is not from faith is sin. Remember, that's the standard of sin, whether or not you have faith. No, that's not the standard. And the high priest Ananias, remember what I said, he appealed to the high priest just a chapter earlier, commanding those standing beside him to strike him on the mouth. Then Paul said to him, God is going to strike you, you whitewashed wall. Do you sit to try to meet according to the law in violation of the law in order to be struck? And this is all allegorical because, Luke would have known what Matthew had him say in chapter 23. Woe to you, scribes, Pharisees, hypocrites! For you are like whitewashed tombs, which on the outside appear beautiful, but inside they are full of dead men's bones and all uncleanness. And what did he say? God is going to strike you, whitewashed wall. It's the same insult. And it's toward the same group of people. You see, he was talking to who? The leaders of the people. And he even makes this clear in the beginning of Matthew 23. And he spoke to the crowds and to his disciples, saying, the scribes and the Pharisees have seated themselves in the chair of Moses. This is a position of authority. And this is why, when you go to a leader of the people, you are not to insult them. When I talk about the Talmud being wrong, I use the Torah. I don't insult them. I don't use ad hominem. Therefore, all that they tell you to do and keep, but do not do according to their deeds, for they say things and do not do them. But then he goes on for the whole rest of Matthew 23 and insults the leader of the people. I do not recommend that. But those standing nearby said, do you revile the high priest of God? And Paul said, I was not aware, brothers, that he was the high priest. How would you not be aware of that? You appeal to the high priest in the previous chapter, and Ananias has clearly been the high priest for a significant period of time because he's mentioned in Acts 4 and 5. How would you not know, as the Pharisee of Pharisees, taught by Gamaliel, that Ananias was the high priest? Then he says, for it is written, you shall not speak evil of the ruler of the people. Indeed, you shall not. But knowing that one group was Sadducees, and this is important, remember, he was arrested on charges of defiling the sacred place by bringing in uncircumcised men. This is the whole reason for this trial. The whole reason. That he had violated the Torah and brought in uncircumcised men into the temple. But what does he say? He starts off by insulting the high priest, and then he goes on with this important statement. But knowing that one group were Sadducees and the other Pharisees, Paul began crying out in the Sanhedrin, "Brothers, I am a Pharisee, a son of Pharisees. I am on trial for the hope and resurrection of the dead." Whoosh. Once again, like completely. I missed it. I missed it. You missed it. We all missed it. We read this and said, must be why he's on trial. Like, you know why? Because you read one chapter a day. By the time you get to the next chapter, you've forgotten the context. You forgot why he was arrested is because he was defiling the temple. He was not arrested for anything about this statement. That's not why he was arrested. And it even tells you he was seeking to take advantage, knowing that there were two groups of people in this room: the Sadducees, who did not believe in the resurrection of the dead, and the Pharisees, who did. As he said this, there was dissension between the Pharisees and Sadducees, and the assembly was divided. For the Sadducees say there is no resurrection, nor angel or spirit, but the Pharisees acknowledge them all. And they occurred a great outcry. I believe the Sadducees were an early Karaite cult. And I believe the Karaites were also the Masoretic cult. Because the Pharisees, who became the rabbis and the Talmudists, they had no interest in making the Torah easier to access. The Karaite, Sadducee, Masoretics did. They wanted the people to read the words themselves. And the other occurred a great outcry, and some of the scribes of the Pharisaic party stood up and began to argue heatedly, saying, "We find nothing wrong with this man. Suppose the spirit or an angel has spoken to him?" What happened to their accusations? It's just like, how do we not see this? Like, Paul didn't prove anything here. He was not. And you can go on to read this, because Paul never addresses, and you just keep reading, chapter 24. He now goes before a Roman governor. Like, why? I mean, he was originally accused of violating the Torah. And you go back to Acts 18, and what do you see? The proconsul says, "This man cannot be judged by me for violating the Torah." Now we're back once again before a Roman being charged with violating the Torah. And what do you see there? That he even tried to desecrate the temple, and then we arrested him. We wanted to judge him according to our own law. But Lysias, the commander, came along and with much violence took him out of our hands. Well, because Paul intentionally caused violence. He spoke a lie to cause dissension and then was rescued by the Romans. According to his accusers to come before you, by examining himself concerning all these matters, you will be able to ascertain the things which we accuse him of. Why would he be able to do that? He's not a Jew. He doesn't know Torah. And the Jews also joined in the attack, asserting that these things were so. And when the governor had nodded for him to speak, Paul answered, "Knowing that for many years you have been a judge to this nation, I cheerfully make my defense, since you were able to ascertain the fact that no more than 12 days ago I went up to Jerusalem to worship. Neither in the temple, nor in the synagogues, nor across the city did they find me carrying on discussion with anyone or causing a riot." Was that why you were arrested by the Jews? Because you were causing a riot? I mean, what in the world? That's like crazy. But remember, we go back a chapter. What did he do? He caused a riot. It just like the sin upon sin sort of thing. Like, he was arrested for defiling the temple, and then he was in the trial, and he causes a riot by lying and saying I was arrested because I was preaching the resurrection of the dead, which caused a riot. And now he's in before Felix, and he says, I never caused a riot." Well, what? Okay. Did you not see what happened there, Paul, when you lied and said you were arrested for preaching the resurrection of the dead? Nor were they able to prove to you of what they are now accusing me. But this I confess, that according to the way which they call a sect, I do serve God of our fathers, believing everything that is in accordance with the law and the prophets. And I've already proven from the epistles this is absolutely, utterly a lie. Absolutely, utterly a lie. Because he calls the law bondage. Having a hope in God for which these men are waiting, that there shall certainly be a resurrection of both the righteous and the unrighteous. In view of this, I also do my best to maintain always a conscience without fault, both before God and before men. You can't be both. You can't. This is a little lifting of the skirt, so to speak. Paul revealing his shame. That, the 1 Corinthians 9 statement of, to the Jews I am a Jew, to the Greek I am a Greek. He tries to be both hats. Now, after several years, I came to bring alms to my nation in offerings. See, several years. Look, what happened that you were no longer obeying Torah, going up to the chosen city 3 times a year? You've waited several years to return and still believe that you were right before God? In which they found me, having been purified in the temple, without any crowd or uproar. But there were some Jews from Asia who sought to have been present before you and to make accusation if they should have anything against me. Or else they let these men tell them wrongdoing they found when I stood before the Sanhedrin. Other than for this one statement, which I shouted out while standing among them, for the resurrection of the dead, I am on trial before you for today. But Felix, having a more accurate knowledge about the way, put them off, saying, when Lysias the commander comes down, I will decide your case. And then it tells us, the wife of Felix convinced him to listen about the idol. And this is so important too. This allegory, remember? Because, women more often fall into this emotional trap and emotional bondage of the net from the fisher of men. And this is like in the garden, the woman eating of the tree of the knowledge of good and evil and convincing the husband to do the same. But as he was discussing righteousness, self-control, and judgment to come, Felix became frightened and answered, go away for the present. When I find time, I will call you. So that's the trial of the millennia. That's the trial that reveals so much. And it reveals, that the Jews had the authority to kill Jay if they wanted to. The Jews had the authority to try him. Why didn't they? Why didn't they try him? Why did they leave it up to the Romans? Why did the Romans do what they say when we see the Romans acting so much differently in the book of Acts in these trials? They don't seek to put anyone to death immediately. They want to do what's right. I hope this study edifies all of you. I hope I can get back and do another one soon, Yah willing. Yah bless you. And I pray for all of you to be Baruch. And please pray for me for wisdom and for some debts to be paid off quickly.